Joining you as Acting Prime Minister today. Around anonymous donations and ensure that New Zealanders overseas who have not been able to return home due to COVID-19 are able to vote in next year's election. In the House this week, we will see further progress on important legislation, including the passing of the supermarket bill to end the anti-competitive land wars that stop competitors from our duopoly from setting up shops, tackling one of the root causes of higher food prices in New Zealand. We're also planning the first readings of the Māori Electoral option people will all officially come into existence. This is a significant moment for our country as we stand up a fully national health service that will ensure that no matter where you are in the country, you can access the high-quality health services that New Zealanders deserve. A number of other income support measures kick in from July the 1st as well, including increases to paid parental leave payments and rates rebates. Today, I can announce that Cabinet has confirmed a further package of measures to support Ukraine's self-defence in the face of Russia's unprovoked and illegal invasion. We will be contributing a further $4.5 million to the NATO Trust Fund for of the $4.2 million that we contributed to the NATO Fund in March. The Government is also extending current deployments of New Zealand Defence Force intelligence, logistics and liaison officers in the UK, Germany and Belgium. The deployment of 6 NZDF intelligence analysts to the UK and the use of New Zealand-based open source intelligence capability to support partner intelligence requirements will be extended by 5 months to November 30th, along with the deployment of a further 6 NZDF intelligence analysts to the UK. We're also extending the deployment of 4 NZDF logistics specialists in Germany by 2 months until August 31. For the next 2 months. The decision to extend and enhance these deployments demonstrates our strong commitment to Ukraine's self-defence and to delivering in close coordination with our international partners. This increase is in response to requests from our international partners and opportunities that have been identified by New Zealand diplomatic and defence officials since Cabinet made our initial decision to deploy personnel in March. On a related note, the RNZAF aircraft was based at RAF Bryce Norton in the United Kingdom. Crew on the Hercules were assigned consignments, transporting donated milk out 62 flights, transporting 256,000 kilograms of military aid. I'd like to thank the returning personnel for their hugely to be completed shortly, with personnel returning next month. I'm also announcing today the secondment of a specialist New Zealand senior military investigator to the International Today's support adds to the more than $33 million in direct funding that New Zealand has provided to date, alongside trade and economic sanctions that have limited Russia's ability to finance and equip the war and the provision of military hardware and personnel. This commitment demonstrates New Zealand's complete support for the people of Ukraine, our allegiance to those nations who are also acting against Putin's illegal war. And I want the people of Ukraine to know that they can continue to rely on sustained support from New Zealand, all points I know that the Prime Minister will take with her on her visit to Europe. Happy to take your questions.
Deputy Prime Minister, was Nanaima Huta... Sorry? Sorry, Claire was saying something to me. Was Nanaima Huta...
I find that it's best just to carry on when Claire talks to you, Jason.
Was she wrong to tweet her...
Huta herself to explain when in the Labour Party we have operated conscience votes when it comes to issues like abortion. The vast majority of our caucus have supported abortion law reform, and most recently when we had the Safe Areas Bill, I think there might have been 3 members of the party who didn't support that. So as a as well, and she has led the way in New Zealand on taking this issue away from being within the Crimes Act to being a health issue and securing better services for women in New Zealand. So we can stand very proudly on our record.
Deputy Prime Minister, is it not hypocritical for her to vote against decriminalising
It was a government bill, and I stand by what we're doing here. Everybody in New Zealand knows what Jacinda Ardern's position is on this issue and what the Labour Party's position is.
Is she tweeting in her personal capacity, or was she tweeting as the Foreign Minister of New Zealand?
On issues such as this, the Labour Party has adopted conscience positions.
She tweeted about the
again,
Supreme
you would have
Court
to ask her
decision.
that.
And just further to the point,
some
though,
members of the public will see that as hypocritical?
Oh, look, as I say, we have always had members in the Labour Party who have taken conscience positions on this, but this was a government bill that decriminalised abortion. We had never had that. Jacinda Ardern in the 2017 election campaign stood up and said that was what we would do. It was Labour Party policy to make it a health issue, and we delivered on that. What we do have, however, in the opposition is a leader of O'Connor and Simeon Brown, even in this last 24 to 48 hours, not supporting the right to abortion services in New Zealand. So, yep, we will always have conscience votes on these matters, but the Labour Party and the government has driven the change in this area.
Prime Robertson, you're talking about national, you're trying to...
would see that as hypocritical.
I was going to say, people
then calling into question national and telling New Zealanders that they can't be trusted on their position on abortion. Are you not politicising the distress that will
easier access to abortion services? We have done that. In America, you have a generation of women who thought that this issue was settled. And what we have here is an opposition leader who clearly has a view that he holds on this, which he is now spinning to say that he promises not to take away those rights. We know what Jacinda Ardern's position is here, and we know what Christopher Luxon's position is here.
What you are doing, though, is politicising the distress that people are feeling about the Supreme Court decision here in New Zealand.
I don't agree with that. What I'm stating is what we have done, and what I'm doing is also looking at given what he has said in the past, given that over half of his caucus actually voted against that bill. We have a conscience vote in Parliament, but the Labor Party is the party that introduced decriminalisation.
Prime Minister, when she was overseas in the US, didn't go anywhere near the issue of gun control, in fact stayed very away from it. Why has she waded into this debate so strongly, given it's a US domestic issue?
Well, I think the comments I saw from the Prime Minister in the weekend were couched in the language of human rights, and that these are rights that women in New Zealand will look across to the United States and see them as human rights that they feel women there should have, as women here do as well. So that was the way in which the Prime Minister characterised her comments. Anna.
Can the public trust National, do you think, to uphold this commitment that they won't make any...
We know from the language that Christopher Luxon has used in the past that he thinks that abortion is tantamount to murder. He put out 2 statements in 2 days in the weekend because he clearly was concerned that his real views were going to get through to New Zealanders. What we have now is a Labor Party that's actually acted to decriminalisation and a National Party that's taking his rights away. I think people can judge the difference of those 2 things.
In the weekend, it was quite a hefty post about some of the concerns you've had recently over political discourse and violence. Can you tell us some of the reasons behind why you posted that and why at that time?
Oh, look, I'd been reflecting myself about the decision in America. I have 2 nieces who both live in the United States. I think a lot of people around the world have spent some time reflecting on what many of us thought was a settled piece of law and rights that women in America had, and that disappeared. And I do link it in some ways to the growth of bigotry. And I think but we've got to stand up to these sorts of things, and whether it's directed at you personally or people you know or women or Māori, we should stand up to it. And that was the point I was trying to make.
Deputy Prime Minister, what does it sort of, what do you think it says about the sort of quality of parliamentary debate, I guess, that, you know, we're having this big discussion about horrendous maternal suicide rates, that sort of thing, gets very little debate?
Yeah, look, I mean, we should concern ourselves with the health and well-being of all New Zealanders, and especially those, you know, pregnant women. We consider that constantly. When today we've been talking about access to vaccines and so on, we make sure that we are supporting good quality maternal health. I know that Minister Verrill, it's a particular interest area of hers, and she wants to make sure we continue to work on those issues. We should be having good debates about those things, as we should be about these sorts of issues that are important to the value set of many, many New Zealanders.
The verbal you and threat in Danny Burke, have you seen that sort of those instances increase for yourself personally? Have you had to readjust your security settings at all?
I certainly have seen an increase in the amount of threats that myself and others have received, and I want to make clear for people the likes of the Prime Minister, this is I mean, we're doing this because, as we've said from the beginning, the people of Ukraine have been subject to an illegal invasion by Russia, and they need our help and our support, as many, many nations around the world have been providing. We value the relationships we have in the European Union. We share a lot of values, and so it's important for us in situations like this to do the right thing. The free trade negotiations are separate to that. They've been ongoing for some time, and we continue to be at the table to get the best outcomes we can, but our role in the Ukraine is simply about doing the right thing.
And just on the fentanyl that's been found detected in the white powder, how concerned are you with the news that fentanyl's in the country?
Oh, look, I'm very concerned whenever we have a situation where people find themselves unwell, or in this case even hospitalised. And we really do need to know what they're taking, have drugs tested more easily, and we need to make sure, firstly, that people aren't using those drugs, but secondly, that if they are, that they understand the importance of being extremely careful, and obviously making sure that we've got a supply of the drugs that are needed to counteract the effects.
On that, the Drug Foundation says that we're grossly unprepared for a fentanyl outbreak, calling for more funding for tests and life-saving medicine. So is there anything the government will do on that? Well, I'm not aware of any concern about the availability, I think it's of naloxone, which is the drug that counteracts the effects of fentanyl. The advice we've had is there is no concern about the supply of that and the ability of it, but we will continue to make sure that we provide services to keep New Zealanders safe in these situations.
Minister Robertson, just on the electoral changes proposed this morning, they're obviously being framed up as increasing trust and confidence in donations and greater transparency. I'm just interested in your donations. It's obviously only come down as far as 5,000. And then the other issue as well is around the reporting. Whilst you've moved the 30,000 amount down to 20,000, at the moment it's having to disclose within 10 days of receipt, but that's moving to only annually in the 2 years that aren't election year, which actually means that you're being transparent about those donations fewer times over 3 years than you would be otherwise. Can you just talk me through how it improves transparency and gives greater trust and confidence when those two things seem to be the opposite?
Well, I don't. The first one is definitely a significant improvement on where we are in terms of.
It hasn't gone as far.
Yeah, it hasn't gone as far. So going to $5,000 is a significant improvement. My understanding is that the advice from officials was that as you go further and further down, the administrative burden and costs of having to go through identify all of those people starts to counterbalance the value of what you're doing. So officials' advice was that $5,000 sat somewhere around an achievable improvement that wasn't an unnecessary administrative burden on political parties. So that was a balance situation there. In terms of the change around the $30,000 to $20,000, look, my understanding is there was an agreement that we needed the amount to be less, that the most important time period for that obviously most concerned and the most focused on it, and so that was the reason for it.
Does that mean, though, because you still have that discrepancy between the 1,500 and the 5,000 and the rules are different, obviously, versus parties, are you still going to run into those same problems of the party collecting and then sort of transferring to candidates under sort of, headquarters or whatever, because you don't have the same sort of rules apply?
Yeah, look, again, it's difficult because people will tend to want to potentially donate more to a party than to a candidate, because a party is a bigger entity. It has greater costs that it needs to undertake, and so, what we were trying to do was make that more transparent and make that fairer, whilst also not affecting individual candidates. And then you've got the issue that not all candidates are members of parties, and so the distinction between two was maintained in part for that reason.
Do you think these changes go far enough, or do you think it will still leave some New Zealanders wondering about who or what is actually
I think it is a job well done. There is, of course, the wider independent review that's already underway in terms of broader electoral law. That's due to report at the end of next year, and that will be able to look at some other issues. But in order to do something that we could pass and get through for the 2023 election, I think we've achieved that.
Can I just quickly ask, slightly same theme, different topic, transparency. Paul Eagle obviously this morning announced his bid. What's your sense?
Christine Fletcher, Jim Anderton, I believe they all, served out their term, and then once they were elected, they resigned and there was a by-election. Well, what it means is that people are able to manage this, and my understanding is Mr Eagle does intend to continue to provide constituency services during that period of time. Those of us who are around him will continue to provide support as well. So, this is not an unusual thing, and I think, Mr Eagle will make a great Mayor of Wellington, and I hope that he gets there.
Prime Minister, regarding the recent Christchurch murder, this alleged offender was under the care of our mental health services. There have now been a number of stabbings of strangers by people with mental health issues. Is the public at greater risk because of failings by our mental health system?
Oh, look, I think an enormous number of assumptions that you've made in that question, and I'm not really in a position to comment on the specific circumstances of this person. I think that would be unwise anyway, given that there don't know what the circumstances are here.
There's been reports of people still practicing conversion practices despite it being banned in New Zealand. Have you heard about this, and are you surprised that it's still going on?
I did read an article today about an individual who said that he intended to carry on with those practices. Clearly, if he goes ahead in the way that I think he intends to, he would be in breach of the law, and so there would be consequences for it. I think it's really important to remember that what we were seeking to ban here were the practices that attempted to change somebody's sexuality, to convert them, as it were. What we want to encourage, though, is good quality counselling services to be available to people as they work through issues to do with sexuality or gender. Good counselling for people who want to change and go out to do that with intent will be breaching the law.
Minister, the cost of importing petrol is continuing to rise. It hit another record to the latest data release on Friday. Are you considering putting
my position the last time you asked me, Janae. Obviously, we've already announced extensions through to August, which is the period we're in now. We continue to monitor the situation. Equally, from the 1st of August, we have the new cost of living payment coming in, and other supports are still available. But we haven't made a decision about that. But we are obviously aware of the situation and continue to monitor it.
Can we infer from your answer referencing the payment that perhaps the tax cut will stop and the payment will kick
and to consider the submissions that have come in. We've been talking with our social partners, with Business New Zealand and the Council of Trade Unions, about those submissions and about our next once Cabinet has gone through that process.
those submissions that closed at the end of April. Why have they not been put online yet so we can see what people think about income insurance?
It's not usual when the government does a consultation process that the submissions are released at a date sometime after they've been put in place. The government needs to take its time
Fentanyl again, a victim's father is calling for the government to take an incredibly hard line with suppliers and dealers of the drug, like murder charges of deaths occurred. Do you support that?
Well, I certainly support making sure that we crack down on people who deal in illegal drugs, and obviously that's been a focus for the New Zealand Police in recent times, and we've seen a number of busts around people who do supply. We obviously are taking an approach with those who use, where we're trying to get a harm minimisation situation, but when it comes to those who supply, absolutely we should crack down on them.
And a recent poll's shown Kiwis support changes to the drug laws to a
us to do that when it comes to those low-level offences for use. We want initially to take a health-based approach. When it comes to those who deal and supply, though, that is a very, very different matter. Thanks, everyone.